Me now is Center for Youth Policy at the Menzies Research Center Director Freya Leach and LNP MP Henry Pike. Welcome to both of you. Now, Freya, I want to talk to you about this here. Housing, it is like the #1 concern for young people. You're a young person. The first draft proposals under New South Wales Premier Chris Minns, he's got this accelerated precincts idea in Sydney's north and northwest. He wants to put these micro cities all around in these outer suburbs with 30,000 homes and some sort of density and things like this. Is this the solution? Is this going to be the solution to getting young people into homes?
It's hard to say. I mean, I think you're exactly right. It is the #1 issue, and for good reason. Home ownership has never been more difficult for young people than it is today. The question is, will this be enough? I'm not so sure. We've had about 1.2 million new migrants come to the country since the election. We've built about 380,000 houses. The math ain't mathin', as James says. So I'm not sure if these micro cities are going to change that. I think it's the right approach. Planning reform is definitely needed, but there are a lot of other factors impacting the housing market as well. We've seen builders going bust. The rate of builders going bust has increased by 150% in the last year. At the same time, the number of people going into apprenticeships has decreased by 22%. Costs of materials, inflation, interest rates are all still going up. So amidst that environment, will Chris Minns' micro cities be the solution? I'd love if they were. I'm just not confident.
Yeah, and Henry Pike, I mean, you're in Queensland, so it's slightly different for you, but the same problem exists basically everywhere. It's too many people, not enough houses, it costs too much to build, there's too many regulations, all of this stuff. Where is the government falling down on its ability to create this? And how much can the federal government even do besides dialing down the huge number of migrants that we're getting into the country every year to actually encourage the supply of housing?
It's a very, very good question, James. It's one of the most intractable problems that we have in public policy at the moment. How do we get affordable housing? How do we get enough housing to meet the growing demand? And I take my hat off to Chris Minns. I think this is a part of the puzzle that needs to be done. I think this is a good step forward. But there is a lot that we need to do at all levels of government, and I think the role for the federal government is to really use what we have, and that is a lot of money and a lot of pressure to be able to lean on the state governments and say, how are you going to actually increase supply? We can turn down demand. We've already made announcements around trying to bring migration down to a sustainable level. But really, the pressure needs to be on local governments and state governments to work out how do we boost supply, how do we reform your planning systems to enable people to build homes, and how do we get that trunk infrastructure built out to these areas where we need to cater for the growth.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, if you're putting the housing out in places like Kellyville and Bella Vista, beautiful parts of the world, but it's a long way from anything. Anyway, let's move on, though, because there's so much else to talk about. We brought you this story yesterday, and now supermarket giant Woolworths have apologized after backtracking on their Australia Day merchandise blackout. Now, this all comes around the preparation for the Paris Olympics, and Woolies said, oh, yeah, we got the Olympics going on. We'll now sell some national flags, green and gold cupcakes, donuts, and a smash cake, whatever that is, with $1 off every product supporting Paralympics Australia. Lovely stuff, and they said that we acknowledge that we disappointed many of you and our other customers when we decided not to sell Australian-themed merchandise in January this year. I note, though, Henry, they didn't say Australia Day, they said in January this year. Like they can't even bring themselves to say the words. What do you make of this backflip? Is this just all about trying to get Peter Dutton not to break him up?
That may be part of it, James. That may be part of it. I did also note the omission of the words Australia Day from their statement. And as the proponent of my Australia Day bill to ensure we keep the day on the 26th of January, I was disappointed to see that. But also they acknowledged the Australian flag not as our flag, but as the symbol of the Australian Olympic team. And I thought, okay, that's odd. But it's also the symbol of our nation. Isn't that worth celebrating? Why are you only bringing it in at this point in time? Look, I welcome their backflip. I think it's long overdue. But I hope that as we creep around to Australia Day next year, I'm not going to just see green and gold cupcakes, but I want the full Australian paraphernalia. I want all the bunting to be able to purchase to take over to my place for my barbecue.
Yeah, but I mean, Freya, it's really amazing to me. We are in July, so Australia Day is like 5-6 months away, and we are already having this debate. Isn't there a huge problem here when corporates like Woolworths and all these other companies, they keep trying to just, dial things around in the culture according to their own kind of C-suite ethics, which are very lefty, very woke, and all of that, rather than just giving people what they want. Amazing.
I know, right? I mean, that's the thing. As a private company, ultimately they can do whatever they want. And if they want to boycott Australia Day, they can do that. But wading into culture war territory from the comfy couches of your multi-billion-dollar company executive office, I don't think that's a smart thing to do. And I think they're realizing it puts you into a tough position, and they're backtracking. And I think what we do know about Australia is they don't want elites trying to change our culture by stealth.
Yeah.
If we are going to have a conversation about changing the date, then that should be in the open and driven by the public. It shouldn't be driven by people sitting in C-suite offices, like you said.
Well, and I was going to get to the Queensland crime crisis in a minute with Henry, but I want to just follow up with this for you because, you're at the Menzies Research Centre. There's a lot of talk about social cohesion and, how we come together as a nation. And I know Australia Day is a symbolic thing, but is it a damaging thing if we don't have any sort of uniting symbols or days that we can just get together around rather than having this horrible, torturous conversation, God help us, every year?
I know. Well, it's part of what makes a country a nation rather than just a state. You can be a state where people all happen to live together, or a dormitory. You happen to live in the same place at the same time. But that doesn't make you a nation. You're a nation when you have shared stories and values that bind you together into one people. Mm-hmm. As we lose symbol after symbol, day after day, tradition after tradition, we undermine that nationhood, and Australia starts to be reduced to a country, a state, but not a nation of unified people. And that is a real risk, and I think that's something we should fight against.
That is very, very well said.